Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining our session today on what leaders need. Isn't a perk, it's oxygen. Now, I can still see there's more people trickling in, and while we wait for them to join, I am curious. There's something that made you click register. There's something about this topic that made you show up today. Something resonated. So we're interested in hearing what you're seeing. If you wouldn't mind dropping in chat, what leadership tension are you seeing around you right now? What is it looking like? I'd love to hear from you. And so feel free to get a little fearlessly authentic with us. Thanks, Marissa. Yes, this week can be a bit exhausted. Jill says overworked. Um, Competing priorities, rapid changes.
No delegation,
Yeah.
uncertainty on the next move. The team is exhausted. Yep.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
this is a good one. Sense of needing to or trying to control what is uncontrollable. Thank you, Katie.
Colleen says the future work with AI, right? It's a big question we're all asking.
Hmm. Yeah, AI adoption and while still keeping the team going. Yeah, exhaustion, cognitive overload. Yep. Now, this is really, really great stuff. So thank you to those who are participating and keep that going. And we will be coming back to this. But now, as a way of introduction, I'm Kay Bassi, and I am joined by my wonderful colleague, Cameron Cardos. And listen, I'm not going to take up our time doing a big introduction or putting up that standard bio about our background or experiences. As interesting as those are, that's not what you care about. What you should really care about is that both Cameron and I are leaderologists with leaderology, and we are absolutely obsessed with anything that helps our leaders thrive in today's world while changing it for the better. That's what we care about. And so Cameron and I are going to be guiding you through today's session. And I have to say, I am a bit distracted here, folks, because we're seeing everybody joining and we've got quite a turnout. So note to self, we're going to try and keep at a good pace and allow for ample time for Q&A at the end because that's where the real conversation happens anyway. And so, as we move through today's session, if something resonates, something you want to dig deeper on, feel free to take a screenshot, and we're happy to circle back, right? But back to this whole conversation at hand, perks versus oxygen. What are we really talking about? And to answer that, we need to zoom out for a second. See, we're not operating in the same environment we were 3 years ago. Some would say we're not operating in the same environment we were a year ago. And given the events of this weekend, that timeline could have contracted a little further to a week ago, right? That's the velocity of change we're absorbing. It's real. We're navigating tremendous economic pressure. There's cultural and political tension. There's shifts in public policy that is directly affecting our workforce stability. Our algorithms have gone wild. Truth doesn't sound like truth anymore. And on top of that, we have very scary viral essays being published warning us that AI is accelerating at unimaginable speed. Right? That, all of that is pressure. And guess what? Our leaders are sitting right in the middle of it. Right? Their patience is running thin. Ambiguity remains constant. Cognitive overload, as someone mentioned, remains constant. Expectations remain high, and then the grind remains high. And that is a lot of pressure for our leaders. So I want to quantify what we're all feeling with some data. Here are some extraordinary insights from very recent reputable research reports. That was a mouthful, folks. I won't be repeating that, but I do want to draw your attention to a couple of key findings. Right, 7 out of 10 mid-level leaders are reporting burnout and high stress given the demands of their role. But only a third say they feel equipped to lead through this constant barrage of change they're experiencing. See, these leaders are the shoulders of our organization. And yet, this is the layer we expect to carry the biggest transformation. That's the moment we're in. Which brings us to why we're here today, right? In expansion seasons, organizations could paper over capability gaps with perks, right? We were giving wellness stipends. We invented democratized coaching. We built culture initiatives. We were even handing out pet insurance. And those weren't bad, but they were built for abundance. And we're no longer in abundance. See, the tools that worked in the expansion season don't really seem to be working in this contracting period, right? The wellness stipends aren't fixing the decision fatigue we're seeing and feeling. Same as simply having access to ad hoc coaching when you need it isn't fixing the accountability and capability gaps that we're seeing. Now, we all know oxygen is invisible, right? But when it's missing, everything fails. And right now, we're asking too many of our leaders to breathe through a straw, right? Without ample oxygen, these leaders will suffocate. And when the shoulders collapse, the strategy, the execution, the culture will collapse with it. So Cameron and I are going to spend time today really exploring and assessing where is oxygen thinning for us right now? How can we rejuvenate the system? And how can we scale it in a way that the oxygen pumps around the entire body and not just in one lung? We have a lot of great insights ahead in the conversations we're going to have. And we have some high impact tools we want to leave you with that will help you circulate that oxygen within your system. So I really encourage you to hang on until the end for that. They are incredible, actionable tools for your seats. Now, in order to get into all of that, a question you may be asking is, what the heck are you even talking about when you say oxygen? So I want to explain that. So when we say oxygen, we're not meaning this gasp of air. We're not meaning a temporary relief. We mean fuel, fuel in your tank, fuel in your system, because oxygen isn't something leaders consume. It's something that must circulate through the bloodstream of the organization. It's what allows our body to function under pressure, regardless of what else is out there. And so when we were asking you in the chat, what leadership tension are you feeling? This is what we were talking about. This is where oxygen is thinning for our leaders, right? This is the oxygen gap. And so it wouldn't be appropriate for us to share how we make our leaders feel better. We have to face the reality we're in. It's evolving, but it's not going away. I think a better question for us to address is how do we build a leader's capability to breathe in this environment or any environment that follows? At Leaderology, we have codified what actually fuels leaders in moments like this. And it's not whether they have perks like wellness retreats or bring your dog to work day. My dog is brought to work today, or Pizza Fridays. I love Pizza Fridays. Please do not get rid of those. As nice as those are to have, none of these things give us oxygen when the air runs thin. See, what gives our leaders room to excel is a disciplined and intentional operating system. That's what the research shows, that actively builds and sustains fearlessly authentic leaders. Now, for some of you who are new to the work of leaderology, have heard about fearless authenticity in the peripherals, it could sound like a feel-good philosophy, buzzwordy. And I'm here to say that is anything but. It is practical, it is necessary, it is needed right now. So I'm going to let us explain what we mean by that.
Right. So what does it actually mean? It's in the center of our operating system. And this is how we define what makes a fearlessly authentic leader, right? Fearless authenticity is the conviction to act in alignment with your purpose and principles while cultivating spaces for others to do the same. And as Kay mentioned, it's something that we don't stop talking about. If you've interacted with us anywhere, we say it all the time. When a leader uses their courage to share something in the room that may have been previously avoided, right? They say that hard piece out loud. So we want to hear from you all. How have you seen this show up? How have you seen fearless authenticity show up in leaders at work? So we're going to do a Slido, and we would love for you to scan the QR code and submit your responses. Feel free to add a word or add a phrase. So we'll give a few moments to do that. And I think it's also important to note, right, like fearless authenticity, it's not an excuse to say it's my way or the highway, right? We want to find how to tap into the core of who a leader really is. And fearless authenticity means that we create that space for others to do so as well. So, yeah, we'd love to hear. Transparency,
Ooh.
yeah, being transparent, having the courage to speak up, that's definitely huge. Oh, staying curious as technology changes, right? We need to make sure that
Mhm.
our organizations are staying authentic to who we are, but also being able to transition and be open to change. I love that. Challenging the status quo, that's a great one.
I love ethical leadership. Yes, that's very in alignment with principles and values, right?
Like safety, truth telling, and also being able to create the space to do that. Absolutely.
Oh, we're getting some really great ones in. And you can see, right? Fearless authenticity is tangible. You can see it, you can feel it, it shows up in behaviors, it's observable. And fearless authenticity is critical to the archetype of a modern leader, especially given the generations entering the workplace, the multiple generation workplace, and the technological evolutions taking place at warp speed around us. And this fearlessly authentic operating system is what builds the leaders that change the world, that are leading in it and not merely surviving it. That's how critical it is. And I'm going to break this down. So it has to start with root. Right? Fearless authenticity begins with internal clarity. It's what gives you internal oxygen. And root is the discipline of self-awareness and self-alignment. Right? When uncertainty rises, it's leaders with this internal clarity, or who don't have that internal clarity that tend to suffocate first. So before you can even lead others, you have to get clear on your values. What do you stand for? And how do you uniquely contribute with your strengths? And what impact are you here to create in this moment? See, these rooted leaders, they strengthen their fearlessly authentic core. They do vigorous self-examination so that they can build the capabilities to pivot to any situation around them. And they're more likely to move with this steady conviction while building consensus around them. And it's that conviction that becomes this breathable air in times of ambiguity or uncertainty. So I want to make this practical. Right, here are three coaching prompts you can be asking yourself. What values do I refuse to compromise under pressure? What strengths am I underusing right now? What kind of impact do I want my team to feel? when they experience my leadership. So if you were to strip away your title, your responsibilities, what do you actually stand for as a leader? That's what we want to get to. Because most leaders will operate from reaction, right? But rooted, the fearlessly authentic leaders, they operate with conviction and intention. They're like the palm trees in this image, right? The winds can come at high speeds, but they have these deep, deep roots that allows them to flex to the conditions around them without breaking down. So it's really critical to have these root conversations with yourselves, to get clear, to get convicted. But conviction alone isn't enough. Right? If fear fills the room, we've seen performance collapse. And the strong leaders, they make truth safe. They build the conditions for courage. They build psychological safety. And ironically, psychological safety takes risk. Right? It takes risk for a leader to model vulnerability, to invite dissent, to normalize hard conversations that need to be had. And this is what Cameron meant by cultivating psychological safe spaces in our definition earlier. It is not a feel-good philosophy, folks. Psychological safety is a strategic advantage for you right now. And let me explain. Everyone, everyone is using AI to make decisions quickly, including your competitors. But what psychological safety allows us to do is make sure those decisions are well informed and not taking place in tech vacuums. And it's protecting your long-term customer relationships, your brand, your principles over this need for short-term numbers and quick pace and speed. That's the benefit that psychological safety can provide. And cultures that can't speak the truth, they can't adapt to the pace that's about to hit us. So I want to take your oxygen pulse right now. I want to try something. You need to take a few minutes to yourself to think about how would you personally complete these statements, right? The last time I felt unequivocally supported at work was. The last time I felt I could fully be myself at work was. And the last time I felt safe sharing my opinion at work was. See, now for some of you, you've had probably many recent examples in mind, and I mean recent in the last 20, 30 days. But in my experience, when I've asked these same questions to your peers, many feel, right, Albert, it's been a while. They feel surprised by how long it has been since they personally felt truly supported or safe to share and voice their complete and honest opinion. Now let's flip it. Think about the people on your team or colleagues you work with on a routine basis. How do you think they would fill in the blanks when it came to you? Yeah. These are the questions we have to be asking ourselves because as leaders, we have an opportunity to use our skills to intentionally cultivate space that helps our leaders thrive and helps our people be, be their best selves, bring their best thinking that benefits the organization. Here are some additional tools, and feel free to take a screenshot to help you get that necessary airflow in the room and make sure your decisions aren't happening in vacuums. Uh, Start with asking the last question first in your meetings. Before we get into the agenda, is there anything that we're not seeing that needs to be addressed? Is something needs to be voiced? Start there. And publicly thank dissent. I cannot tell you how critical this is. You know, we're really good at declaring psychological safety. I have an open door, open Teams, open Slack policy. Come to me with your concerns. And we're really good at adding psychological safety with something that sounds like that to our values, our team values, and the organization's values. And that's really important, right? But for people to exercise their right to have psychological safety, it has to be demonstrated. Because I'm not going to exercise my right unless I'm clear that I'm not going to be faced with retribution or retaliation. And so, what does that look like? Say you've been running a large project and you're 75% in, but there's a member on your team who, or maybe even a peer, right? Something's not sitting right in their gut. There's something that's giving them concern, and maybe they voice it. How do you respond to that? You're already so committed and you have a timeline. The best way to respond is to publicly thank them. Thank you for voicing that. Let's put all concerns, all challenges, all assumptions, all risks on the table. We need to do that so that we can commit to a way forward together. Right? So thank you for voicing that. Anyone else? Right? Just doing that will lead to smarter risk awareness, faster course correction, higher engagement, because all of a sudden my voice doesn't only matter, it's heard. We get stronger innovation. One example I love to give is, imagine if someone didn't stand up and say, hey, I love how focused we are on this market, but this is other market, guys, that we're completely ignoring, that loves this Cheetos hot. Like, that's the innovation. And my teen would be beside herself if she did not have hot Cheetos in our pantry. Right? That innovation came from somebody having the courage to share something, and maybe there being some psychological safety in the room to allow for that. So again, it's not a feel-good philosophy, and it's not a buzzword. This is a strategic advantage, and making truth safe isn't going to happen by accident. It's going to happen through intentional practice, which brings us to Rise. See, Rise is all about your leadership skills and your capabilities, putting them in action in a way that it multiplies fearless authenticity around you. And ironically, Rise is where most organizations and leaders stall or fall. Right? Because when leaders don't create space for others, when they need to be moving at such velocity that they hoarding control in choking the teams, they are choking innovation in turn. But leaders who coach intentionally, they delegate strategically, they give feedback that builds but doesn't bruise, they engage resistance rather than avoiding it, and they help others identify their route. Yeah, they're the ones who create lift. And this is how we get that oxygen distributed through the organization's bloodstream. So here's some ways you can do that. Delegation is critical. Leaders who feel indispensable are often oxygen bottlenecks. So you have to ask yourself, what are some tasks that are essential for you to do, and which can you delegate? Are there items on your plate that could help a high performer stretch? Where are you still holding work that someone else with your coaching and your leadership could grow into? Okay. And also, another important one is to make time on your one-on-ones to have those root conversations we talked about a few slides back. Because when you're exchanging your values and your principles, you're understanding perspectives. And that's when it gets easier to close that oxygen gap. So lean into these conversations. And finally, renew. Right. Fearless authenticity at Leaderology is not a destination. It is a continued practice. It is demonstrated, not declared. And we can't just say, okay, I'm fearlessly authentic. The whole definition of it is that it is always a work in progress. And it requires a growth mindset and disciplined real-time reflection. See, fearlessly authentic leaders don't just assume alignment lasts because we had some great meetings and offsites a few weeks back. They exercise the courage to test it. right? They look at the impact. Is my impact landing the way I intended? How do I even know? Do I have the right feedback loops in place? Or am I growing? Or am I still protecting some old habits I really don't want to deal with right now because I need to move at such speed? I don't have time for that. We're here to tell you the strongest leaders, the fearlessly authentic ones, will audit themselves before others have to. And it's this renewal which keeps the oxygen fresh in your systems. So ask yourself, when was the last time someone gave you feedback that made you uncomfortable? And one activity I like to do with my coaching clients is have them audit their last 5 decisions. Was there a time you didn't speak up but wished you had? What was the outcome? How about, was there a time when a direct report or a peer didn't speak up in the room, but you wish they had? How do you get them there? See, this renewal does require friction. It requires you to get uncomfortable, take further risk. But we also know our greatest growth comes out of discord. So we have to lean into it. And this is what leadership oxygen looks like. See, when this flywheel is in motion, the authenticity compounds. Leaders are getting better, they're getting deeper and faster with each turn because they're building muscle memory. All of a sudden, a sudden new change isn't disrupting their system because they are steady, they're rooted, and they've been building the capabilities to address that event. And that's why that fearlessly authentic core muscle in the center is so important because it will allow you to pivot to every situation. And when this is in motion, when you have this internal alignment, it's what rapidly fuels your external impact. So the long and short of it, or the TLDR, as the kids like to say, is that fearless authenticity is the leadership oxygen needed today, right? We can understand it. I'm sure a lot of us are grasping what I'm putting down in the last few slides, right? We're aware of that. But there is a difference between being aware of something and taking action on it. So, how do we build that muscle consistently and at scale in this high pressure contracting environment? I'm going to give my voice a rest for a second and let Cameron step in here, if you don't mind, Cameron, to guide us through that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Tay. And like she mentioned, sometimes we just get stuck. Organizations and leaders stall, and it's especially when it comes to rise. Not because our leaders aren't motivated to build something that lasts, and it's not because they don't care. Our leaders are caring, but it's because they don't know how to translate their good intentions into repeatable leadership skills. So let's take a quick pause. We want to take another pulse check. A poll's going to pop up on the screen. Which of these skills do your leaders need most? Please pick one that resonates with you, and we'll let for a moment to do that.
Yeah, we got answers coming in, Cameron.
Oh, they seem like they're changing.
Uh-huh.
We have another couple seconds to do so.
Mm-hmm. Good that. A few more responses. Uh, and the poll here. I'll share
All
the
right.
results.
Perfect. Yeah,
I
I see the results. Yeah. It's interesting, right? With delegation, I think many leaders are having trouble delegating. There's a lot going on, and people have a lot on their plates, and they have trouble getting out of the weeds. So I see that one is, I think, it's our second place. Leading changes first. There's many cliches about change and changes that are continuing to come, and we have to be ready to go and also ready to grow, right? Through the change. We're seeing that a lot for sure. Awesome.
Mm.
It's one thing to know that leadership skills are a way of multiplying fearless authenticity, and it's another to learn how to actually put that into place, right? It's hard work to transform leadership skills, and we can't do it alone. We like to say that none of the best leaders learned in a vacuum, right? They learned with structured and expert support, guiding them on, like here, how to rise. And so this is why we built Pathways by Leaderology. We know that growth doesn't happen in a vacuum. And with the challenges today making it hard for leaders to breathe, we need to create targeted support that gives that oxygen. Pathways meets leaders where they need oxygen most, and it fuels them through micro learning, expert coaching support, self awareness assessments, and getting leaders to build their own action plans to create transformation sticks for them. And so we've made sure to make it binge worthy. And as you can see, Pathways brings it all to life through vivid storytelling themes. It creates a binge worthy experience to ensure that the content lands with the leader in the most meaningful way and in the most compelling way as well. So with each of the pathways, we have atmospheric shifts, and it's all about elevating through delegation and accountability. As we kind of talked about today, this helps build skills around the act of delegating, but also by giving coaching and feedback while maintaining that needed accountability. And then Taming the Wild is all about leading change, which is hugely critical for the challenges that we may know these leaders are facing today, right? As we mentioned, it was the number one in the poll. And then lastly, Concrete Connections focuses on developing high performing teams and providing leaders with an operating model that supports them in defining what it takes to build a team that can move fast, it can move with speed, the team is aligned and results that are delivered well. So we've made sure to make sure that every pathway is anchored within the fearlessly authentic operating system. And as we've mentioned here at Leaderology, we want to build fearlessly authentic leaders who change the world and not just merely survive in it. And we have expert coaches to be your guide. They're absolutely incredible. And if you want to embed the oxygen system within your own organization, you may even consider our certified partner track. This is where your L&D team and HR business partners become that internal support system to guide each leader through their pathway. Leaderology is here. We're here to set them up for success to become a certified partner. So if you're interested in getting a personalized walkthrough of all or any of our pathways, feel free to reach out to me. But yeah, enough about us. We need to get back to you. Because if you want the fearlessly authentic oxygen in your organization, you have to start with yourself. You cannot scale what you haven't practiced, right? And once you've done that internal work, that's when your job shifts. You start by helping leaders clarify their core. You coach them, you delegate, and you build their capability. And that's how we get the oxygen to circulate to meet the moment, right? So here are some free high impact tools you can use right away to help get the oxygen back into your system. From atmospheric shifts pathways, this is a self-assessment for leaders to evaluate their delegation style. So think of it as like a Cosmo quiz with some real actionable next steps. And then from Taming the Wild, here's a toolkit to better engage resistance as you and your team might be navigating changes within your organization. And from Concrete Connections, the Performance Signals Playbook for You is one of my absolute favorites to know what conversations to have when team member performance turns red, yellow, or green. So feel free, you can scan the QR codes or download them and find them on our resources tab at leaderology.com. So yeah, thank you all. I think we have a few minutes to take any questions, right, Kay? Just around
Yeah,
what we spoke about.
let's take a look what's coming in. Um, okay, let's see. Ooh, okay. We're starting to get some in. All right. Um, how do we get senior leadership to invest in leaders given budget increases? This is exactly the right question for the moment we're in. right? I think this is an important one. I think we have to flip it on its head. I don't think we lean with, we want this leadership internal initiative or we need investment here. I think we have to shift our perspective of what is the cost of us not investing in our leaders right now. Um, right, Katie, the risk if we do nothing, because when these leaders collapse, and some of them are already collapsing, when these shoulders collapse, the strategy doesn't execute, the culture doesn't uphold, and what you're going to end up seeing is your top talent, your great people, great leaders end up leaving quietly before they leave you officially. That's the trend. And again, I don't mean to dismiss budget constraints or freezes because they are real. They are very real right now. But what I do want to point out is in our experience, the with the global financial crisis in 2008, the pandemic, and I've had the opportunity to work on multiple continents, and companies I've observed this is that in times of contraction, the companies that treat leadership development like a discretionary spend are the ones who, when they get through it, they're the ones who are most likely to have a very real people problem on top of a business problem. And, I think just for the leaders in the room, they're not looking for perks. They're not asking for perks. What they're needing is the help so the organization has oxygen. And I think we have to start the conversation there with the CFO or whoever's controlling the purse string. You know, I think that was a great question. Um, what else? Keep those questions coming in, folks. Oh, okay. How do we get buy-in for leaders that are resistant or don't think they need fearless authenticity? I wouldn't even touch fearless authenticity. Is that okay for me to say? I wouldn't even do the framework. I think we have to meet them where they're at. And so, because resistant leaders, quite honestly, are the most overwhelmed right now. The idea of taking one more thing on is likely going to get a hard no or a hard pass. Um, and so, as practitioners, we can see the fix, right? But it's difficult to get resistant leaders there. I don't think we go in with, we have this internal leadership initiative I would love for you to be a part of, or there's this great program by Pathways by Leaderology, you should enroll in. We won't get there. We won't get their participation. I think we have to put a coach's hat on and, maybe ask them, if if there was one thing that would make your job less impossible right now, what would it be? And then we just listen. Because in my experience, 9 times out of 10, what you're going to hear is something that sounds like the oxygen gap, but the leaders don't have the language to to say that. But that's where your job becomes more important because you do have the language and you can, with your coaching, um, can guide them towards the right path or pathways. Um, but I think that's where you start because resistant leaders don't need convincing as much as they need to be understood first. We meet them where they're at. Um, so waiting for questions to come in. Is there anything you might add, Cameron? And to anything I've
Yeah.
shared?
Yeah. No, the question around getting buy-in from leaders that are resistant to change, I think something that I would add to that is sometimes it's hard for our own leaders how do we get buy-in from our own leaders, the ones above us? And I think if that's the case, we have to start with our oxygen mask first, right? I think Case mentioned it. Sometimes like you forget, right? You're putting on your oxygen mask first. And when your leaders see that you're operating differently and you're operating confidently, then they see you steady, they see you with clear mind, they see you more convicted. And I think that becomes the most compelling case that you can make, right? Like you yourself as the leader become the proof of concept. And I think that itself is a living testimony and is more powerful than I think. So hopefully that could be a reminder as you go on with your day.
I'm grinning because I think that was perfect. I like your answer a lot more actually. Put the oxygen mask on. Okay, we have one more here. Oh, from Casey. As a headhunter, I often hear um, orgs say they want the change and investment, so I recruit to that. However, many times the reality can be different. We have a huge opportunity to impact an organization from this way up to the leadership game, and often at the start, there is investment. Any tips to leverage this process to drive change or further investment? I think it again goes to they're going to be looking for ROI, right? And so we have to flip that again on its head with the cost of not investing. Um, and, really kind of when they're saying and that they want this thing very early on in the conversation, really asking them, well, what does that look like? And how will you know you've been successful? How will you measure it? If we get more into that consultative space, that we're part of that organization, helping them think through that, that already has some great adoption. Um, and yeah, things do shift. Reality can be different once you're inside. But um, those conversations early on, and those conversations have to be repeated to make sure that alignment stays, I think is really critical. Great question, Case. I hope I've been able to give some insight there, but it's a tough one. I love what Karen said. You could also try showing the cost of turnover and disengagement. That's exactly the data, right? Um, Lack of engagement, lack of productivity, turnover, churn, especially mid-level, because that's the shoulder, and if there's a break there, it has ripple effect from the strategy to the execution. So yeah. Well, I know we're at time, folks, so we'll close this out. Cameron, do you want to close this out?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you all. With that, I'll close this out with immense gratitude. So thank you all so much for your time and your trust and your attention. We hope that you leave this session with a refreshed perspective on how to meet the moment. And if you would like to continue, if it was the authentic conversation with either of us to process what oxygen looks like for you or your team, please reach out. We'd absolutely welcome it. So thank you all so much. And we're glad that you made it.
Hey, oh, here's our bio headshot
Right.
slide.
Forgot about that.
Yep, thank you everyone. Reach out. We'd love to stay in contact. There will be a webinar recording. And if you're interested in any other information, let us know. But thank you for your time today. We wish you a great rest of your day. Put on that oxygen mask.